Why are you even here? You've embarrassed this family enough. My mother's voice hit me the moment I stepped into the living room, crisp and cutting like the Indiana winter still stuck to my coat. The room fell silent. My aunt stopped stirring her tea. My cousin paused his game mid-tap. My father didn't turn toward me. He simply exhaled through his nose as if disappointed before even looking. My brother, leaning back on the sofa with one arm draped over the cushions, smiled the way someone smiles when they enjoy watching another person shrink. My mother lowered her glass and added, quieter but deeper, "Some people shouldn't come home if all they bring back is failure." She didn't even glance at me. Somehow, that indifference hurt worse than anything she could have said. The shame hit fast, the old, familiar burn sweeping up my throat. It felt like being 16 again, standing in the hallway holding a report card I already knew wouldn't be good enough. That same thick feeling of not belonging, of taking up space no one wanted me to take, wrapped around me all over again. I thought that was the end. I didn't know that 10 years later, they would come back to sue me for the life I built without them. I grew up in a 2-story house in Bloomington, a place with white shutters and a yard. My father trimmed every Saturday morning as if the neighbors were grading us. Inside, everything was quieter, heavier. Mason, my older brother, was the family's pride from the moment he could tie his shoes. My parents hung his baseball medals in the hallway and replayed his home run videos every holiday as if they were national treasures. I was the kid with notebooks full of stories no one asked to see. The kid who doodled in margins and got scolded for daydreaming. When relatives came over, they praised Mason like he was destined for greatness, then turned to me with polite, curious eyes that said they didn't expect anything worth hearing. Childhood felt like a long stretch of trying not to be noticed, but constantly being judged anyway. If I spoke too softly, my father said I lacked confidence. If I spoke too firmly, he said I was disrespectful. My mother believed tears were manipulative, so I learned not to cry where anyone could see. I kept most things inside, tucked away like contraband. By 19, I could feel myself disappearing inside that house. I moved to Indianapolis with 2 suitcases and exactly $93. I worked late shifts at a diner, took morning classes at community college, and lived in a studio apartment where the heat rattled like it was struggling to keep me alive. But it was my space, my air, my beginning. For a long time, I believed distance was enough, that miles could soften childhood wounds, that new places could rewrite old stories. I didn't know then that the past has its own map, and it always knows how to find you again. I learned quickly that independence wasn't the romantic, cinematic freedom people talked about. It was the kind of freedom that came with nights staring at a cracked ceiling, counting coins in a jar, hoping they stretched far enough to keep me fed until Friday. The kind that made you feel both proud and terrified at the same time. My studio apartment in Indianapolis was hardly bigger than my parents' walk-in pantry. The walls were thin enough for me to hear my neighbor's dog bark every time someone walked past in the hallway. The heater rattled like it was coughing itself to sleep. I had a futon that sagged in the middle and a thrift store lamp whose cord sparked if you reminded it too aggressively that it was supposed to work. But it was mine, and that mattered. Most evenings, I worked at the Blue Lantern Diner, a place with sticky booths and a jukebox that broke every other week. The regulars were truck drivers, night shift nurses, and college kids too broke to go anywhere nicer. I spent hours pouring weak coffee and memorizing orders, pretending I didn't notice when customers snapped their fingers at me or left no tip. The late nights were hardest. My feet ached, my clothes smelled like grease, and I'd walk home with my breath fogging in the cold, telling myself this was temporary. But temporary has a way of dragging itself into the future. In the mornings, I attended community college classes, clinging to every bit of encouragement my professors offered. When one of them wrote excellent work on top of my essay, I stared at the words so long, the ink nearly blurred. It was silly, maybe, but I hadn't grown up hearing praise. For once, I wanted to believe someone meant it. Still, the deeper wounds from home followed me everywhere. I heard my mother's voice in my head whenever I hesitated. I saw my father's disapproval when I made the smallest mistake. And Mason's smirk came back to me whenever someone looked at me a second too long, as if waiting for me to fail. I didn't know how to shake them off. They had settled into me like shadows. Money was tight, tighter than I admitted to anyone. Some nights I skipped dinner so I could save enough to pay for textbooks. I drank water when hunger clawed at my stomach and told myself it was discipline. I kept my problems quiet. I always had. It felt safer that way. There were moments, though, when things felt almost soft. Like the mornings when the sun came through, the blinds just right, and made the whole apartment glow warm gold. Or the nights when my friend Claire from class invited me to study with her and treated me like someone worth knowing. She didn't ask about my family. She didn't push. She just sat beside me in the campus library, sharing snacks and laughing quietly whenever we lost focus. But every time I took a step forward, something dragged me back. A phone call from home I refused to answer, a memory I didn't ask for, a comment from a stranger that echoed an old wound. I kept going anyway, even when it felt like walking uphill through thick snow. Looking back, I didn't realize then how much these years were shaping me, hardening me, preparing me for a storm I couldn't yet see. I didn't know that one day, everything I built from these years of hunger and quiet persistence would become the very thing my family tried to take away from me. The breaking point came on a July afternoon at the county fair, the kind of place where the smell of fried dough hangs in the air, and families pose for photos beside hay bales, painted with cartoon cows. I hadn't planned on going. Crowds made me nervous, and fairs reminded me too much of childhood weekends spent watching Mason win ribbons while my parents pretended I wasn't standing beside them. But Claire begged me to come with her, promising it would be a quick afternoon, just funnel cake and people watching. I said yes because I was tired of saying no to life. We were near the livestock barn when I heard my name, stretched loudly over the crowd like a rope yanking me backward. I turned and saw them, my family. My mother in a crisp blouse despite the heat. My father in his baseball cap. Mason surrounded by his old teammates, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. My body froze before my mind even caught up. And then it happened. "Everyone," Mason shouted, waving his arm like he was introducing a circus act. "Look who's here, Lena," straight from her glamorous diner shift. His friends burst into laughter, the kind that doesn't bother hiding its teeth. My mother pressed her lips into a thin smile that curved with pity. My father looked me up and down like he was assessing the damage. Heat rushed to my cheeks, but my feet wouldn't move. Claire stepped slightly in front of me, as if shielding me, but it was too late. Mason wasn't finished. "Mom said you're still living in that shoebox apartment, right? What is it, like 400 a month? Must be nice not having real responsibilities." My mother chuckled, shaking her head. "She's always been behind," she said to the group, not to me. "We tried to help, but some people just can't keep up." The world blurred. The fair lights smudged into streaks. A group of teenagers walking by paused to stare. Someone whispered, "That's rough." Another person laughed under their breath. I felt my chest tighten, that old familiar crush of humiliation pressing down hard, the same feeling I'd had since childhood. I hated that it still worked on me. Claire grabbed my hand. "We should go," but before I could move, Mason delivered the final blow, grinning wide enough to show every tooth. "Honestly, Lena, you should be grateful we're not charging you rent for taking up space in the family tree." Something inside me cracked, not loud, not violent, but quietly, like ice fracturing beneath a boot. It was small, but final. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself. I simply turned away, one step, then another. Claire followed silently, her hand still warm around mine. Behind us, laughter rose again, echoing between the barns and food stalls, carrying all the way out to the parking lot where the sunlight felt too bright for the ache in my chest. I didn't look back, not once, because in that moment I knew that if I did, if I let myself see them standing there, I would lose the tiny piece of dignity I still had left. I walked until their voices were gone, until the fair sounds faded into something dull and distant, until the only thing I could hear was my own breath trying to steady itself. That was the day something shifted. Quietly, deeply. The day I realized walking away wasn't weakness. It was the first strong thing I had done in years. Leaving that fair felt like stepping out of a burning building. The smoke stayed in my lungs for months. But something else stayed too. A small, steady pulse of determination I couldn't ignore. I didn't want my story to end with humiliation in a dusty fairground. I didn't want to spend my life dodging the shadows of people who never believed in me. I wanted more. I needed more. I picked up extra shifts at the diner until my feet felt carved from stone. I studied after midnight, fighting sleep with cheap coffee and open windows. I applied for every scholarship the community college offered. After a year of pushing myself harder than I ever had, one professor pulled me aside after class. He told me I had a sharp mind and an instinct for systems work. He encouraged me to apply to a tech apprenticeship program in Indianapolis, the kind that sounded impossible for someone like me. But I applied anyway. 3 weeks later, I got in. It wasn't glamorous. I worked out of a cramped office above a bike repair shop, the air always smelling faintly of chain grease. I started at the very bottom, sorting tickets, answering emails, doing small fixes for clients nobody else wanted to deal with. But every small problem I solved felt like one brick added to a foundation I was finally learning how to stand on. I watched tutorials during lunch breaks. I practiced on weekends. I asked questions even when my voice trembled. Slowly, patterns made sense. Concepts clicked. Projects got bigger. One day, I fixed a bug in a client's scheduling system that had been bothering the senior team for months. They stared at me like I had pulled a rabbit from a hat. The owner of the shop, a man named Carl with thick glasses and the quiet patience of someone who had lived many lives, started giving me more responsibility. He didn't praise often, but when he did, it felt real, earned. He told me once, almost offhandedly, that I was the most determined apprentice he'd ever had. I memorized that sentence the way I used to memorize my mother's criticisms, except this time it felt warm instead of heavy. I saved money, not much at first, but enough to move into a slightly better apartment where the heater didn't rattle and the windows didn't leak when it rained. I bought my first brand new laptop, something no one had owned before me. I worked nights for a small startup to earn extra income, learning everything I could about software security and infrastructure. It was like discovering a language I had always spoken but never knew existed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving, I was building. And someone dangerous enough that my family would one day try to tear it all down. Before I continue, I want to thank you for walking beside me through this part of my journey. If my steps resonate with your own, your gentle support through a like, a comment, a share, or even a subscribe truly means so much to me. I appreciate you more than I can say. Success didn't arrive in a single moment. It came in fragments. A solved error here, a completed project there, a client who asked for me by name. I didn't notice the shift at first. I was too busy working, too busy climbing, too busy refusing to slip back into the person my family believed I was destined to be. But there came a day when I walked into the office and felt something I had never truly felt before: belonging. Carl promoted me quietly, handing me a new badge with my name printed in clean, sharp letters. My hands shook as I clipped it to my shirt. Senior Systems Analyst. It didn't sound flashy to anyone else, but to me, it was a crown. A small one, but mine. The startup I worked nights for asked me to join full-time. They had grown from a cramped garage into a bright office downtown, filled with mismatched chairs and people who drank too much coffee, and genuinely loved what they did. They told me they needed someone who understood security, someone patient and sharp. I didn't realize they meant me until they slid the offer letter across the table. The salary made my vision blur. I accepted. With that job came more stability. I paid off my community college loans. I upgraded from my dented, backfiring car to a used sedan that didn't sound like it was begging for mercy. On weekends, I drove to parks outside the city, walking trails I'd only seen in photos before. I breathed easier. I slept deeper. For the first time, I felt like the world wasn't pressing against my throat. But life has a way of twisting just when you start to trust your footing. And I didn't know that my calm, my growth, my hard-earned peace was only the foundation. The real storm was still waiting. A legal one. A brutal one. One that would shake everything I built and drag my past straight to my doorstep. I didn't know yet that success paints a target on your back, especially when the people who raised you believe your achievements should have belonged to them instead. It started with an envelope, a plain white one, slipped under my apartment door on a quiet Tuesday morning. No return address, no stamp, just my name written in a handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My stomach tightened even before I bent down to pick it up. Some instincts never fade. Inside was a formal letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. The words blurred for a moment before coming into focus. Sharp as shattered glass. My family was filing a lawsuit against me. Not a message, not a warning, not a conversation. A lawsuit. They were claiming I had benefited financially from resources and investments provided by the family, requesting restitution, damages, and partial ownership of the company I had helped build from the ground up. I read the page again, slower this time, each sentence twisting deeper into my chest. They were demanding a portion of my life, the life they mocked, the life they abandoned, the life they told me would amount to nothing. Now that it was something, they wanted a piece. Claire came over as soon as I called her. She sat beside me on the couch, reading the letter with her eyebrows knotted. "They can't be serious," she whispered. But they were. My family had always excelled at rewriting reality, especially when it benefited them. A week later, the first court date was scheduled. Walking into that courthouse felt surreal, like entering a movie where I was both the villain and the victim in someone else's script. My family sat together in a row, unified only by greed. My mother's lips curved into that same familiar line of disappointment. My father refused to meet my gaze. Mason smirked like he had already won. But I wasn't the scared girl they once knew. I walked in with an attorney of my own, a calm, sharp woman named Ava, who looked at my family the way someone looks at a puzzle they already know how to solve. The hearing was brief. Their claims were weak, their evidence non-existent. The judge's questions cut through their arguments like clean wind through dust. My mother's composure cracked first. My father stumbled through his statements. Mason grew red with frustration, the smirk fading piece by piece. When the judge dismissed their request pending further review, I finally exhaled. Not victory, not relief. Just air. Real, steady air. Her words settled into me like a warmth I hadn't felt since childhood. The truth wasn't just legal. It was personal. My family hadn't broken me. They hadn't shaped my success. They hadn't earned a single piece of the woman I became. As I walked away from the courthouse, sunlight poured onto the steps. For the first time, I didn't look back. Thank you for being here with me through this turning point. If any part of my story resonates with your own battles, your gentle support through a like, a comment, a share, or even a quiet subscribe truly means the world to me. I'm grateful for you.